Recording in progress.
I call the regular meeting of the City of Ashland Planning Commission to order for August 11th, 2026. I will note that our meetings are available on Zoom and RVTV. The public can find information on how to participate in Planning Commission meetings in our public notices, as well as directions on how to find the full meeting materials, applications, and staff reports. I do note that we have 5 of the 7 members here, so we do have a quorum. Staff announcements. Brandon.
I don't have any staff announcements this evening. Thank you.
Oh, well, okay. And consent agenda, we have approval of minutes for July 14th. Would somebody like to move adoption of the consent agenda?
Move to adopt consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passed. Public forum. If you wish to speak on an issue that is not on the agenda, please fill out the pink speakers form in the back on the side and give it to Michael, and he will bring it to me. I will acknowledge that we did get a letter from Joseph Kauth, dated August 6th. Thank you. Concerning a request for comprehensive study on urban growth, climate change, and urban heat island effect. Would any of the commissioners like to discuss the letter, or do you want to put it off till open discussion at the end of the meeting? Or do you want to wait and have further contact with him?
I would like him to come in and talk to us about it,
Okay.
but that's me.
Yeah, it's a new item. I would love to have that conversation later.
Okay. Okay, we will move on to our legislative or type 2 public hearings. The first is a type 3 or legislative public hearings. The first is a type 3 public hearing on code amendment regarding variances for driveways for flag lots. This is planning action PA-L-2026-00020. And the applicant is the City of Ashland. The request is to amend AMC 18.5.3.060 variances for flag lots to allow variances of greater than 18% grade for flag lots created as legal lots of record prior to 1997, when the city adopted its hillside development standards. Currently, AMC 18.5.3.060 allows grades on flag lots up to 15% and variances up to 18%. As mentioned, the applicant is the City of Ashland. Ordinance references are 18.5.3.060, and the request is to make a recommendation on code amendment to the City Council. Because this is a legislative hearing, we do not need to ask about ex parte contact or site visits. I will acknowledge written public comments the Planning Commission has received from, and my apologies for mispronouncing your name in the future if I do, Eugenia Andrianova, Len and Karen Eisenberg. We got 2 letters from them. Pamela McLaughlin, Kent McLaughlin, William H. Sherlock and Zach Mitke, attorneys for Len and Karen Eisenberg and Kent and Pamela McLaughlin. Catherine Ellison, MD, we got 2 letters from her. Douglas R. and Linda G. Smith, we also got 2 letters from them. Carrie Mastane, Suzanne and Ed McBride, Robert Hilton, John and Stephanie Bullock, Amy Gunter, Robert and Susan Hutton, Cindy Peer, Ronald A. Parker and Pamela Braun Parker, Kurt Chappelle, David Auersler, Jim McCarthy, Nadine Lefkowitz, Jay Reek and Sarah Sama, Troy Brown Jr., Steve Rouse, Rogue Advocates, John Klotzel, Dee and Rob Collins, and Margaret Young. So thank you all for taking the time to write to us. We will now have the staff presentation. Derek, you want to
Thank you, Chair Werner.
go ahead?
The legislative action before you tonight is a proposal to amend the Ashland Municipal Code, Section 1853060F, to address access constraints on certain pre-existing lots created prior to the 1997 Hillside Ordinance. Our existing code limits new flag drive grades to 15%, with a variance up to 18% possible for a 200-foot cumulative limit. Some legally created lots predate those standards and may have no feasible driveway alignment that can meet the current code limits. The proposed amendment before you would create a narrowly defined variance process rather than simply automatically approving steeper driveways. The proposals being presented separately from Senate Bill 974. You initially saw it in study sessions alongside 974, but it is being presented separately from the 974 implementation package, so that this as a local policy choice can be considered independently, and should you want to look at it further, looking at it further won't delay 974, which is subject to some state timelines. In terms of why an amendment is needed, again, in 1997, the city adopted the Hillside Development Standards through Ordinance 2808. Here, 30 years later, our current code has a limitation on new flag drives at 15% maximum, with a variance allowing them to go up to 18%. But some lots that were in existence prior to that 1997 Hillside Ordinance can't reach a buildable area with a driveway without exceeding 18% because of topography. In April of this year, the Land Use Board of Appeals remanded a city decision approving a driveway grade variance that went above 18%. The Land Use Board of Appeals concluded that the current wording in the land use ordinance doesn't authorize any variance above 18% under any circumstances. The issue is therefore a code limitation affecting a class of pre-97 hillside lots, not a request to approve one particular property. So in terms of what the ordinance adoption would change, in terms of newly created lots, there would be no change. The existing 15% maximum grade and the allowance for a variance up to 18% would remain. And that standard in the code is for platting of new lots. So in order to create a new lot, you have to demonstrate that you have a driveway meeting the standards. But for pre-1997 legal lots of record, a variance could be allowed to exceed 18% only when topography makes a compliant driveway to a buildable area on the lot impossible. Each property would have to independently apply for a variance with the adoption of the ordinance does not approve any specific proposals. Relief is limited to the minimum deviation necessary to provide access, and the applicant would need to satisfy all the variance criteria in AMC 1855. Fire department review for fire code compliance would still be required. The fire code requirements remain independent. Flag drives are still considered a fire apparatus access road under AMC 1853060I. A land use variance doesn't modify or waive any Oregon fire code requirements. The fire code review considers more than grade. It also looks at length, width, vertical clearance, and surface composition, and the fire code official retains independent authority to approve steeper grades where allowed and to require alternative protection measures to support those steeper grades. Any driveway approved through the land use variance process must still receive all required fire code approvals before development could proceed. And in your file or in your packet is included a memo from the Deputy Fire Chief, Mark Shea, in support of the proposed language. And Mark is available to answer any questions that you might have tonight. In terms of the specific amendment language, the section as amended would read, new flag drive grades shall not exceed a maximum grade of 15%. Variances may be granted for new flag drives. for grades in excess of 15%, but no greater than 18%, provided that the cumulative length of such variances across multiple sections of the flag drive does not exceed 200 feet. Variances may be granted for grades in excess of 18% for driveways serving legal lots of record that were created before the effective date of the Hillside Development Standards in Ordinance number 2808, adopted December 3rd, 1997, where the applicant demonstrates that due to topographic constraints, no driveway alignment meeting the maximum grade standards of this subsection can provide vehicular access to a buildable area of the lot. Driveways approved under such a variance would remain subject to the fire apparatus access requirement of the Oregon Fire Code, including any approval required by the fire code official. Such variances shall be required to meet all criteria of approval in Chapter 18.5.5 variances. In looking at this issue, we started looking at lots through the buildable lands inventory that were vacant and on steeply sloped land. 74 of those lots, which are not super visible in this map, but 74 of those lots shown in green here were considered as potential. Ultimately, 13 of them in red, which are shown here, and primarily over here, but there's also a list of tax lots and addresses in your packet that were based on GIS data likely to have drives greater than 50 feet in length and be subject to flag drive standards where an issue may come up under this section. And we just reiterate, this is not based on any development proposals for these lots. It's just looking at the GIS data and the fact that there's not an easy driveway placement that would serve a house on the lots that's likely to be less than 50 feet. So it's assumed these would have drive greater than 50 feet and the grades would potentially necessitate a variance because of driveway grade. Planning Commission and City Council previously reviewed this concept during initial discussions along with the implementation package for Senate Bill 974. That was in study sessions back in April and May, and the City Council reviewed this same material on June 1st. As proposed, Ordinance 3309 has been separated to allow this local policy to be considered independently. The amendment's a Type 3 legislative land use ordinance amendment requiring Planning Commission recommendation to the Council. And the next step following a recommendation from you tonight would be a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance at the Council on September 15th. We've got a suggested motion here based on a staff recommendation would be that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the proposed draft ordinance with the language shown here. I'd be happy to answer any questions you'll have. I also have Deputy Chief Mark Shea here, as well as Carmel Zaran from the City Attorney's Office, if you have questions for either of them.
I just have a language question. So it says new lots. It seems like instead of new lots or as well as new lots, you could say, and those created since, so it immediately references the date of the Hillside Ordinance so that it kind of immediately limits. Because there was, in all of the comments we got, it seemed like there was some confusion that we're opening the door to people doing this without, you know, and so, and maybe it's to just, it's a limited ordinance, so is there a way to limit its applicability to those lots that it affects? So, period.
And I think the language is intended, the section that we're changing actually applies to lots proposed to be created, and the actual requirement is before plat. So you are talking about new lots that are not yet platted.
Yeah, but we are actually talking about lots that already exist.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to, I mean, what we're trying to bring in is the fact that we're applying, as Luba's decision would read out, you're applying a standard to plat a lot for lots that already exist. So trying to make clear that.
So I still don't, maybe I wasn't clear what I was saying is.
Okay.
And maybe there isn't another way to do it. I mean, really, it's not, well, it's not a new ordinance on its own. It just seems like it needs to be clearer that it only affects those 13 lots
So-
somehow.
Yeah, as drafted, there's a couple changes for the commission to be considerate of. One, the new, at the beginning of the section, isn't for new lots, it's for a new flag drive. For new flag drives, and they could be installed on existing lots, or if somebody were to partition a property to create a new lot, that flag drive would be subject to the 15 to 18% maximum. There is another section that talks about the cumulative length of driveway variances across multiple sections. I'm just bringing this up because we didn't cover it in the presentation. That was reviewed and approved ultimately as a prior planning action, as an interpretation of the multiple sections, so long as they cumulatively didn't extend over 200 feet. But by establishing that the 15% is a maximum with up to 18% for all new flag drives, that would apply to any property that is not subject to the following provision, which is granted in excess of 18%, and that is limited for lots that were created before December 1st, 1997.
Why wouldn't it just be its own section? I mean, like, if you got section F, why wouldn't it just be its own statement?
It could be. It could state new flag drives shall not exceed 15% up to 18%. But you'd still have to say with the following exceptions and then provide that exception. And it is embedded in the same paragraph, but that is a potential
I'm just trying
modification.
to respond to my understanding of what people's issues, what their issues were, which is that there's this, it feels fuzzy. It seemed like, that's what I was picking up. And there's a fear that it will get applied in other places and people will do what they, try to get variances for doing something different than what this is about. So that's all. I'm done.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Werner, and thanks, Derek, for the presentation. Just a quick question here. The staff report says that any relief above 18% would be limited to the minimum deviation necessary. And I don't see that phrase in the actual ordinance. Is it in the general variance criteria, or should we perhaps consider adding it to this language?
Just rereading the wording here.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the ordinance language for this section. I believe that's in the variance chapter 18.5.5, which this would be subject to. But I'm going to pull that up.
And while you're looking at for existing language, I think that there ought to be some reference to a licensed geological engineer's report that shows reasonable feasibility of what's being proposed, so that we know that somebody with some credentials has actually looked at it and said, yeah, it can be done at 16%, at 18%, or 19%, or 20%. It doesn't need to be 25%.
Yeah, there is a requirement for physical environmental constraints permit for any development, including the development of driveways that cross over slopes greater than 25% natural grade. And so a driveway that was being proposed across hillside lands that are considered severe slopes or 25 plus would be required to have a geotechnical report currently.
Right, but
But
that,
not in this section. Again, it's not repeating requirements under the physical environmental constraints, which go into the step backs for the retaining walls. There's quite a bit of detail in that section for any cut into constrained slopes in that chapter.
okay, but I guess I'd like to see some indication that the flag lot would have direct consideration by a geotech engineer.
Reference it back to the part of the code, part of the hillside ordinance that talks about a geotech.
And Russell, just to further respond to your question, I think it says no driveway alignment meeting the maximum grade standards can provide vehicular access to a buildable area, then the variance criteria say minimum necessary to alleviate the difficulty. But
Thanks.
you could always make that more explicit, but I think it's covered between the two.
Yeah, fantastic. I think if it's in the broader section, then that makes sense. Can I ask a few other questions
Sure,
here real
go ahead.
quick? Okay. There is public testimony concerning Comprehensive Plan Policy 49. Can you explain why Ordinance 3309 is consistent with our wildfire and emergency access policies?
Well, I could stipulate that all our current wildfire development standards, including construction of the building, the ignition-resistant materials, fuels, general fuels requirements, any of these properties will be in the wildfire overlay zone and all be required to meet those requirements. Again, Mark Shea, our fire marshal, can speak to other code requirements in terms of the driveway grade and how those get applied at the point of building permits.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Yeah, just to add on to what Brandon was saying, I'll evaluate the driveway through the Oregon Fire Code, specifically Chapters 5 and Appendix D, which regulate fire apparatus access. In addition to grade, we'll be looking at composition of the surface, vertical clearance, overall length, and apparatus parking. All factors that I'll look at in evaluating a driveway or a flag road.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Shea. And while I have you up here, do you mind if I ask you a few other questions?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So if we don't put an absolute maximum grade in the land use ordinance, what happens when somebody proposes 20%, 24%, or something even steeper? What factors would cause you to say no, and what types of mitigation make a steeper driveway acceptable?
So factors that might cause me to say no might be length, overall length of the driveway, or an inability to provide a fire apparatus parking area within 150 feet of the structure. If there are circumstances that arise that we cannot meet the fire department apparatus access requirements through Appendix D of the Oregon Fire Code, I'm authorized to look at the Uniform Alternate Construction Standard. And what that allows us to do is to enact a variance in construction standard. The most commonly used in Ashland is a residential sprinkler system, and I work in conjunction with the building official to ensure that that's completed in the project.
Go ahead.
Do you know offhand what a maximum slope is that a fire truck could get access to a fire work area? Like, what's your maximum driveway slope for 100 feet?
Right. The code tells us 10%. We know realistically in Ashland, there's a lot of roadways and driveways that are well beyond that.
Sure.
I don't have the precise number, as we have different models of fire engine. So we might have one that's a bit more restrictive than another.
Yeah, a lot of these comments refer to one specific fire engine, and I assume that's the large one that you wouldn't be using in the hillside anyway. Thank you.
So is the large one, is that more restrictive than the smaller ones? And would the smaller ones be used on hillsides?
Correct. The larger fire engine would be more restrictive on a steeper grade. And we are going to alter our response based on the incident type and sometimes the geography of the area and as well as weather conditions. So, for example, if it's snowy and icy, we're going to take a more nimble, agile vehicle in that instance, as opposed to like the big fire engine that you see driving around town.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more quick question. Would you
Oh, sorry.
recommend,
Um,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. We'll let Russell finish, and then John can ask his question.
Okay. Sorry, John, I'm going to jump over you here. Would you recommend that we put a maximum length or a maximum grade in this ordinance?
I don't recommend that because the fire code gives authority to the fire code official to be more restrictive. So regardless really of what the ordinance says, the fire code supersedes that, and the fire code official has the ability to supersede that.
Thank you very much.
So even if we said on an application, it can only be no more than 25%, you're saying you could go over that and allow 30%?
We could go over that with collaboration between planning, building, and the fire chief.
I have a question for potentially you. What if there's a pre-existing lot record and all of the proposed flag drives to get to that buildable area are rejected? What happens?
Sorry, could you repeat again? So you're saying.
Sure, I'm
you're
saying,
putting
what
it-
if
yeah.
there is a piece of pre-existing lot that's, pre-hillside ordinance, so it's a lot of record, and none of the proposals are viable for planning or for fire, so basically have a lot that's not developable. Whose responsibility is that? From a fire perspective? No, from a city perspective.
Like in the sense of.
I have a
of
lot.
building
and
restriction?
Between fire and planning, they won't let me develop it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would go into the Nolan Dolan question.
That
It's,
doesn't help me, I'm sorry.
it would go into probably a fact-specific analysis into Nolan and Dolan, which you might be familiar with as like a proportionality restriction when it comes to a government's ability to have land use restrictions or similar kind of regulation, and it has to be proportionate to the public health and safety. And so that would be a fact-specific question in that strain of legal argument is kind of my on the cuff
Yeah, I'm
direction.
sorry, I don't really understand that answer. I have a lot between fire safety and planning. It's deemed that it's not developable because there's no viable way to get to that building envelope, even though that lot was pre-allowed. So whose responsibility is it? Does it become a taking, or does it become, like, what happens in that consequence? And saying it's a percentage, I just don't get what you're saying to me, I'm sorry.
Well, that's it. You would have to look at it as a taking, and you'd have to look at each case on a case by case
Oh, yeah, of
basis.
course, it's an individual situation. I'm not saying that it's a blanket at all. Okay, so I was just
But
wondering.
that's it. It's a taking, and then I probably went too far into the weeds for what that would look like, but it would be a form of a taking, is how we would look at it.
And
Yeah.
so-
Thank you.
And so then the property owner would be responsible for doing some sort of appeal or legal challenge?
Yeah.
Because in effect, the city was saying, even though we say your lot is pre-1997 and is therefore buildable, it really isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, case by case, but in general, it'd be in the takings realm.
Okay. John? Commissioner Marr?
Thank you, Chair Brenner. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I have, I guess, a related question. So is a lot deemed buildable if it is not accessible by a driveway? Is it still deemed buildable? In other words, you have an area to park outside of the perimeter of the lot and can still access the lot. Is that deemed buildable?
So, obviously, vehicular access to a property is customarily one of the prerequisites for development of a house, single family. There are other housing types that don't have parking associated with them, but those would not likely be built on hillside lands. So I did want to note that your question in terms of our buildable lands inventory, the assessment of lots, if there was a lot that was entirely landlocked, that had no access, no platted access in the form of a flag lot, and no direct street frontage, the buildable lands inventory likely would have been identifying that property as unbuildable. But the 13 lots in question that we're bringing forth for consideration by the commission this evening, all are legally created lots that do have platted access to a public street, and as such would have the opportunity for vehicular access if the land use regulations were not restrictive to the degree that a driveway, which could otherwise be installed, not be installed due to lack of a opportunity to apply for a variance addressing the minimum unique or unusual circumstances that apply to those properties. What this ordinance doesn't do is authorize the creation of new lots or new flag drives serving newly created lots. And so the ordinance amendment presented doesn't increase the number of potential dwellings beyond what's currently existing, dependent on constrained access beyond the closed or diminishing class of pre-1997 lots of record. So those are a fixed number and would be diminishing over time as they are developed until some point in the future. The ordinance amendment presented to you this evening would no longer be relevant because all of those pre-1997 lots would have been developed.
Got it. I just have one quick follow-up to that. So in the case of, let's just say, a cottage cluster that had a pedestrian easement and it was on a steep slope, that would still be buildable. Let's just say it didn't even violate the 18% grade, still a buildable lot. There's ways to get to that lot. That's what I'm trying to qualify.
For vehicular access, we'd also have to look at fire apparatus access for that cottage housing development, which typically doubles as vehicular access.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I equate this to legislation that allows vintage automobiles owners to exceed pollution emission standards simply as a matter of fact of their inability to install a catalytic converter. So I'm trying to understand the rationale for allowing this exception for these older, quote, buildable lots. And I just want to understand the planning hypothesis behind that, because I believe it's probably justified based on housing production. Is that true? It's primarily to support housing production, or is there an equity argument there too?
I think there's both an equity argument and a housing production argument that the grade standards that we're talking about have historically been applied when new lots are created. That's why it's under the partition chapter. But these are cases that aren't subject to partition. But with the LUBA recent ruling, it was incumbent upon the city to see if that was a change in circumstance for existing properties within the city. And you're noting the housing production strategy and our housing capacity analysis, although in the context of the entire city, 13 lots seems rather small. Those are opportunities for additional housing, which our buildable lands inventory demonstrated all of those lots were needed in order to accommodate our future growth. But further, I do think that there is a equity issue. If there was a land use regulation that was passed by the city subsequent to the creation of the lots that subsequently precluded the development of those properties, I think that does in a sense, disenfranchise those property owners from due use of their property, and that could potentially trigger that takings argument, which would be a fact-based individual assessment on each lot of what they could do with their property if it can't be developed as was originally allowable before the code was adopted.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. So how do you get old lots to come into modern conformance so that they are treated the same way current lots are in terms of wildfire access, anything else?
Where they can meet current requirements, they would be subject to those and would have to, that's why we reduced the number of 74 lots that were pre-existing vacant lots down to 13, because we, without a site-by-site assessment, but looking at the GIS data, determined that they likely could comply with the maximum driveway grade of 15% and not in excess of 18 with the variance. So like the adoption of the the wildfire overlay, all lots are now subject to that. So even these older lots, even though they were created before that ordinance, they can put in fuel breaks and provide general fuel management on site, and so they'll be subject to that requirement. I think in the variance proceedings, the term that was being discussed earlier in terms of what the code says, it states the minimum is, or the variance is the minimum necessary to address the special or unique physical circumstances related to the subject site. So an applicant in applying for a variance would have to demonstrate that the existing natural grade is a unique physical circumstance that they cannot otherwise address and under the limits of the code. If their engineer says they can do a driveway that meets the 18% grade or 15% grade and not require a variance, that would be the path that they would need to take.
And so we're relying on their engineer to give us that information?
You know, essentially their application, the burden is on the applicant to demonstrate that it's necessary.
Go ahead.
I would say that anybody that was trying to develop a flag lot would go to whatever ends they needed to get to get 18 or under. It's not like it's a prize to get a steeper driveway.
Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up on the questions that have been asked about the equity and due process issues, but first I want to thank you, Derek, for providing the geographic information on existing lots of records that were created before adoption of the 1997 Hillside Standards, the 13 or 14 or so. That list is really helpful. It's what we needed to discuss this. And I'm wondering, just as a quick clarification, does the city database of real estate property information include the purchase or transfer date showing when each current owner obtained or took possession of their lot?
City data doesn't include that, but the county records do. So we have access to all that information through Jackson County.
Cool. So we know, based on that information, when an owner would have been noticed of the existence of those hillside standards, right? Whether their possession predated adoption of the standards or whether the possession occurred after the standards, right? Cool. So the follow-up question that I want to ask about the equity consideration is, given that it's a fact-specific inquiry, would one of the relevant factors in a due process claim that might create civil liability to the city in the form of taking, would one of those factors be owner notice of the existence of potentially restrictive hillside standards?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't researched that question specifically to this case. I mean, I do know as a bit of a segue, even looking at some of the manufactured home case law, that, like there was one case as an example where, someone was buying a manufactured home park with the rule in place, that had a more restrictive use, like a tenant favorable restrictive use. And the court found that that person was on notice, and because of that, there was no problem with it. So I think there would probably be a similar analysis. I
Yeah,
bet
that sounds like an analogous situation. And-
That
yeah, and-
that would be how I would imagine it would play out.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think it goes to the question about what happens when you have a pre-1997 lot, and because of this LUBA decision, and because we didn't change the ordinance, you can't develop it. Or even if we do develop the ordinance, you still can't develop it.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you're basically saying that it's, if I own one of those lots and it's pre-1997, when I sell it, then it no longer is developable, and I should have known better if I bought it?
That's kind of where I'm getting at with the notice thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
The date of purchase or transfer or possession is relevant
No,
here.
it's still a taking, because then you're telling that person that owns it already that they can't sell it.
Well, it's relevant, but it's not necessarily dispositive. I think, as we just discussed, it's going to be a factual, weighing of factors in each case. But I see the potential for a takings claim, is what I'm trying to say. I'm also saying that I think there might be a limited set of factual circumstances where such a claim would be successful against the city. And that limited universe of potentially successful taking claims might actually be limited to those lots of record pre-existing the hillside standards that were possessed or obtained by their current owner prior to adoption of the standards. We can talk about it in deliberation, but that's just kind of the thrust of my question here. So let me shift gears just real quick. I only have two more questions. Just to be clear, the proposed ordinance would not by itself authorize construction of any new driveway on any flag lot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and even if the city adopts the ordinance, the fire code official still has independent review and approval authority on any such driveway, right?
Right, and we adopt the ordinance, approve a variance, the fire code official still has review authority independent of that variance to say, yeah, the city said, planning said you could do 20%, but based on conditions, you can't.
And there are a lot of different factors besides driveway grade that you're looking at, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay,
I have just one more.
sure, go ahead.
Okay, just one more quick question, Derek. Public testimony raised an allegation that the required 35-day DLCD notice was not provided. Can staff or the city attorney confirm whether the required notice was provided for the record?
So 35-day notice to DLCD was provided in June. I don't remember the specific date, but it was provided. Again, we had this group with Senate Bill 974. We subsequently chose to separate them. So again, 974 could move forward independently. They're now two distinct ordinances, and we've notified the state subsequently with approval from our regional rep from DLCD to keep them under that original notice, but provide the separate details which have been provided to DLCD.
Thank you, Derek.
Yep.
Yeah, John, you're, Commissioner Marr, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. I just want to clarify. So these variances would be type 1, they'd be administrative by staff, or they would come before planning?
It would be a case-by-case assessment in terms of the physical environmental constraint review. I do think that for instance, a 25% grade variance would be not a clear and objective approval, and so could be scheduled before the commission. Derek, as planning manager, may be able to answer as well.
The only thing I'm not sure is with changes to state law, residential applications, including variances, are becoming an administrative approval, even if they would otherwise have been a type 2. So I think there's a chance with the direction state law is going that any residential applications are likely to be administrative approvals
But they could be called up.
in some cases.
Only on appeal by the applicant, not by a resident, not by a neighbor.
Yeah, House Bill 4037 limits appeals on clear and objective housing applications to the applicant only, and that may be a determination point in terms of whether a variance falls under clear and objective.
Okay, so let's move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. And I have a number of speaker requests, and there are several people here on Zoom. So let's take the Zoom people first. David Orsler? No, okay. Jay Reek?
I don't see that Jay himself is, but Sarah is available, and they said they speak together, so I'll promote Sarah to panelist.
Okay. Can you make it so that we can see John and Sarah? Ah, thank you. Thank you. Sarah, would you like to speak?
Hi, this is Sarah. Jay is actually going to speak on our behalf. We are unfortunately not in the same location, so I will yield my time to Jay.
Okay, Jay, please speak up. We don't see Jay on our screen.
He's still muted, he said. He texted and said he's still muted, so I think.
Can you
whatever we
provide
have to do to-
can you provide his username so he can be promoted to panelist?
We have one,
I think it's JR.
we don't have a JR, we have one that is just iPad.
Oh, that's probably Jay. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you,
Technology working in.
could you show yourself? Turn on your camera?
You know what? I don't have video available to me. I don't have enough bandwidth.
Can you state your name for the record?
You bet. This is Jay Reek from 230 Strawberry Lane.
Okay, thank you very much. Please go ahead. You have.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we submitted written comments, as you saw, in opposition to this ordinance, and we thank the commissioners for reading through the comments and the supporting documents. If you haven't had a chance to do so, we'd encourage you to do so before making a decision, and there's been some good deliberation so far. As we stated in our comments, the proposed changes are not mandated by state law and are inconsistent with state law. Local jurisdictions are charged with adopting either the state fire code or a local fire code that is equal to or more stringent than the protections in the state fire code standards. This proposal is less stringent than state code. The proposal is also inconsistent with the Ashland Comprehensive Plan. In 1997, the City Council wrote that the hillside development standards are, quote, in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and that the comprehensive plan contains specific policies and provisions which provide the basis for this ordinance, unquote. Exempting hillside lots from the well-crafted and long-standing safety-oriented hillside ordinances is clearly inconsistent with the Ashland Comprehensive Plan and dangerous for our community. Parenthetically, I'll mention that hillside standards development identified that it would actually adversely affect 33 properties, and yet the City Council in 97 still decided that the benefit to the community and the safety to the community it was worthwhile to make that difficult decision. Also, the proposed flag driveway code is internally inconsistent, at the same time allowing grades steeper than 18% on some flag lots and prohibiting grades steeper than 18% on other flag lots. How can this be safe in one instance and not in another? The Oregon State Fire Code has already established that it is not safe. Additionally, the ordinance is not related to the SB 974 and is not required by the Senate bill or the state. As mentioned earlier, the minutes from the Planning Commission study session in May indicated that this amendment was presented to the commissioners as part of the legislative changes because of SB 974. And as noted in the May 26th staff memo to the commission in today's minutes or meeting materials, the proposal is not because of SB 74, but is in response to the lieu of remand of the specific application PAT3 2024-0053. Finally, if this proposal is adopted, Ashland will be an extreme outlier for fire safety regulations and building codes in Oregon. We will be seen as reckless with our regulations and codes, especially if a tragedy or accident should occur because of an exceedingly steep driveway. We ask you tonight to deliberate and make your decision in the interest of Ashland's values and our broader citizenry. We ask you to recommit to policies and codes that we all abide by and to protect us and our town. Please reject the proposed amendment to the flag drive grade regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Emil Sandowski, is he available?
Yes, hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes. You're Emil Sandowski?
Yes, my name is Emil Sadovsky.
You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you for the time and for reviewing our written comments. I'm here, excuse me, I'm an attorney here appearing on behalf of Kent and Pamela McLaughlin. We did submit written comments, and so I appreciate the time that you've taken to look those over. Here to speak in opposition of the planning action. The proposed variance amendment caters solely to an elite landowner who knew or should have known prior to their purchase of the vacant property that the driveway would not comply with maximum grade variances. This was the subject. I heard some of this discussion in your deliberation, and I think it's a reasonable thing to consider. It is a breach of the public trust to annihilate a strict health and safety limitation merely to appease a single wealthy landowner. The fire danger in Oregon, and especially in Southern Oregon, increases every year and is reaching extreme levels. Like Spokane, Ashland and its watershed is a tinderbox, and yet your staff is now proposing that you loosen the standards for providing safe fire and emergency access to hillside properties. Nothing in SB 974 requires changes to the driveway grade standards and expressly excludes standards related to fire ingress, egress, public health or safety, and natural hazards. So there's no justification for relaxing the flag drive grade limits under SB 974. This proposal would eliminate the 18% grade cap for existing lots, contrary to current Ashland land use ordinance as interpreted by LUBA, and enable driveway grades far beyond what existence variance framework allows. I also want to point out that this would make Ashland an extreme outlier as far as the grades that it allows. Because flag drives are treated as fire apparatus access roads, and the Oregon Fire Code limits such roads to 10% grade, the amendment is wholly inconsistent with adopted fire code regulations and would undermine emergency access. It also conflicts with the Ashland Comprehensive Plan and the 2025 Community Wildfire Protection Plan, which both prioritize adequate ingress and egress, evacuation capacity, and consistent wildfire resilience measures in light of the city's recent wildfire experience. Steeper grades would heighten erosion and slope instability risks and make Ashland an outlier among Oregon jurisdictions that almost universally cap driveway grades around 10 to 18%, only with strict safeguards. Accordingly, the Commission should reject the proposed variance amendment. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to in-person speakers. We have Carrie Maston. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Oh, I'm new at this, so be patient. I live at 227 Granite. Actually, I inherited the home. My parents lived there for 35 years. And the property that I believe is, you know, the impetus for this whole thing is 231 Granite. And when I heard that an exception was being considered for the flag drive, I just couldn't believe it, because as a retired teacher, I believe in following rules and keeping the rules. And you make one exception and you open it up to other exceptions for everybody. But what I feel is in this discussion is it reeks of entitlement and it reeks of favoritism. And the entitlement seems to come thinking that Ashland, we are so special that we can go against Oregon state law regarding the flight. Well, we're too special. We don't have to follow the Oregon law. And that just feels like entitlement to me. And in terms of favoritism, if I, just a regular old person came and asked for this exception, you would probably say no. And I feel like this, I agree with the person who just spoke, that this does seem like you're spending a lot of time on this issue because of one wealthy landowner who knew before he bought the property that this there was the flag drive regulation limiting the grade to 15% and 18% as a variance. And I just, I appreciate this discussion. I appreciate the way that you are very calm when you speak and polite to each other. And thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak. And I had one other point and I can't even remember. Oh, I know. If you're going to make an exception to a rule, it has to benefit everyone. It has to benefit everyone in the community, and it can't just benefit a few families. And in this case, you're talking about 13 lots, which is like a drop in the bucket. And really, you're only talking about one lot. And, I have 20 seconds. The neighbors have offered to buy this back from the DeBoers for the price they paid plus 10% so that it can be an open space. So that was to answer your question, Carrie. What can be done? The neighbors can get together, buy the land back and make an open space. Okay, thanks. Maybe next time I'll be less nervous. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve Rouse from Rogue Advocates.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Steve Rouse. I'm the president of Rogue Advocates. We're a nonprofit 501c3 land use advocacy group. And this driveway flag lot thing has caught our attention. I submitted written comments, and I'm going to deviate from those and talk more about the lucid discussion you guys had previously, specifically on the taking issue. Clearly, if a lot was owned prior to 1997, that owner still owns the lot, they could have a taking issue. But it's been 30 years. So how many of those people are around? Derek said that they could find that out, and I think that would be relevant information to make your decision if it turns on that. The driveway issue is definitely a slippery slope, more so in the wintertime and snow, rain. I'm not too worried about the fire chief getting his rigs up the hill. I'm more concerned about them careening down the hill. If you've all driven down, try driving down the last part of Strawberry, a 24-degree slope, dry pavement. You're standing on the brake. It's brutal. But I think the taking issue is very relevant, and honestly, by introducing this change you're opening yourself up to more taking. Because if you don't put a steepness limit on the criteria, and you don't put a driveway length, and the city decides that they can't build, well, you're taking from them because there's no clear criteria. You have to, right now, the existing code says if it's more than 200 feet, steeper than 18%, you can't get a variance. Clear cut, no taking issue. You're opening yourself up to more by introducing this kind of complicated language on 13 lots, and it may not even be 13 lots. We don't know specifically if those lots are developable with a sweeping driveway that would not exceed 18%. And finally, I believe this would be in violation of their existing comp plan under the Environmental Resources section. Policy 49 states, and I quote, require more than one ingress, egress route or road widths wide enough to accommodate incoming fire apparatus and evacuating residents simultaneously in an emergency situation. Now, I'm aware that the flag lot that's going up to the specific lot in question in that Luba appeal, it's not wide enough. And to create a road that is wide enough to create two-way traffic, that's a tough one. So anyway, in conclusion, the proposed code revision weakens safety protections for life, first responders, and the wildland suburban interface. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That concludes all the people that I know of that wish to speak. Does anybody else wish to speak to the Planning Commission? Seeing no one, I will ask if the Planning Commission has any questions.
I have a question for the Deputy City Attorney. When the 1997 Hillside Standards got adopted by the city, did that trigger the statute of limitations on a potential takings claim, or would it be city approval or denial of a land use application under applying the standards?
Yeah, I mean, that might be a little too specific for me to answer off the cuff. I mean, I think but I will answer your question a little bit more broadly in the sense that I don't have any issues with this ordinance, and in part because like the taking would be for the properties who otherwise when they purchased it didn't have the restriction, and then all of a sudden suddenly do. But this allows for those properties to still be developed. So to me, like, that's actually kind of a not risky space because that land is not encumbered. And then furthermore, it's sort of actually balanced with the public safety, concerns with fire, and then also kind of in line with the I actually find it in line with the comprehensive plan, sort of in line with the goals of Senate Bill 974, in that it allows for, in that it kind of finds a sweet spot of accommodating for public health with fire and allowing for more buildable land. So that's kind of my general assessment. I have some more specific notes. Mainly in the language of it says that it will work within the fire code, and to quote, driveways approved under such a variance remain subject to the fire apparatus access requirements of the Oregon Fire Code, including any approval required by the fire code official who's going to abide, which, you know, as we hear from Mark Shea, they're going to be looking at the fire code. So to me, that's like a cross-reference that'll incorporate all the fire restrictions.
In terms of that safe space that you defined, would the the fact of owner notice of the standards be a relevant factor in defining the scope of that safe space?
Sorry, safe
I mean,
space. Can
I'm
you?
just really kind of repeating a question I asked before, but it's relevant here. Would the timing of owner notice of these potentially restrictive standards, would that be a relevant factor in defining the scope of that safe space where a property owner couldn't sue the city for a taking?
Yeah, I guess I might need you to clarify, like, on what side, because I think I've heard sort of a 360 response for, I mean, I've heard some comments of, so restrictive as in the city's not allowing development
Well,
restriction,
I'm just
or
talking about the
restriction?
hillside standards generally and the driveway grade standards specifically.
Okay, I might, for hillside standards question specific, I might turn to ComDev to help me out with that one.
So I think I understand the gist of your question in terms of, if we go back in time to 1997 when the Hillside Ordinance was adopted, I would note that the grade standards subsequent to that period have historically been applied at a time when new lots are created. So properties within the hillside area subsequent to 1997, were they to be partitioned or subdivided, the grade standards have to be demonstrated before final plat is signed. And that's the code that went into place in 1997. So lots that were created prior to 1997, there is no standard that they were held to because no plat had subsequently been required. So essentially, when those prior lots, no maximum driveway grade applied, and on some of those lots, the terrain is steep enough that no driveway alignment meeting the criteria cited under the flag partition chapter for flag drives could be met. So again, I think historically we've allowed development on driveways or on pre-existing lots with steep driveways, so that this was really tested with the current land use application that went to LUBA, where they found that just as this body and the city council had approved a driveway that exceeded 18% slope based on it being a pre-existing lot of record, LUBA found that that wasn't supported by the code. So your question is, at this point in time, are those property owners on notice that if we don't make a change, the circumstances have changed due to LUBA's recent ruling?
Well, let me clarify, because the LUBA ruling said that the relevant standard that you're talking about always has been that way and has been since its adoption, that the city's interpretation of it was inconsistent with the code. And so my question relates to the code itself and not to the city's interpretation. But I mean, maybe we won't reach a clear answer on this tonight. That's totally okay. I would, but I do think, these are important, considerations here, and I appreciate you talking them through with me.
Okay. I will go ahead and close the public hearing, unless you see a reason to keep it open. Public hearing's closed. The record's closed. We are into deliberations. What's your pleasure? More questions of the city attorney or Chief Shea?
Chief Shea. So, and this is not supposed to feel contentious or whatever the right word would be, but how, and I don't know if you can answer this, so my experience is that fire tries its best to facilitate what people need, and planning does the same. And when there's these difficult projects, people, we end up working together to try to make things work for the landowner and for fire safety. How, I don't know if this is a fair question, but how would it, how would you go about saying no to somebody?
Saying no to somebody, I would start with obviously evaluating the project and the criteria. If I made the determination that it was outside of the requirements of the code, beyond what we could make any kind of contingencies or alternatives to, I'd speak with the fire chief, let him know that it was my opinion that we cannot provide adequate service to the proposed building. And then I would also speak with planning staff and explain my reasonings for not being able to provide that service. It's a careful evaluation, and the goal is to provide safe housing. If we just cannot do that, then we cannot do that.
Okay, so I know it's totally not a real situation, but I was just curious if you would feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So things that would mitigate your decision are pools for a water source, gravel, or more grade on the driveway, paving the driveway versus having it be gravel, things like that?
Yeah, those could all be factors in addition to a residential sprinkler system, in addition to additional wildfire hardening of the property, meaning more vegetation management, or alternative parking areas for fire departments where maybe we're able to design the property where we don't necessarily utilize the driveway, but we have an alternative way to access the building with hose lines, to be able to look at alternatives that way.
Okay, so if the flag lot's here and it's going up, you would consider whether you could go, there are houses in front, so if you could go around the house and get access that way?
Right. Of course, it's a hypothetical situation, but if there is a way through the planning process that we can safely park a fire engine and still reach that house within 150 feet, potentially longer if it has a sprinkler system, or a greater distance if it has a sprinkler system, then I would look at that as a potential acceptable alternative.
So therefore you don't need 2 access points?
Per the fire code, you don't need 2 access points for one single home on a property. Or if it's a flag lot, if it's 2 to 3 homes, you don't need an additional access point.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to switch for a second. Sorry, I'm just taking
No,
over here.
go for it.
That quote about an egress that would allow 2 vehicles to go past each other, is that part of the code that is actually in subdivision rather than in single family?
Yeah, the section that he's referring to is in the comprehensive plan that relates to having roads that have multiple points of ingress and egress.
So it's about roads, not driveways?
I think it does say both roads and access, so.
It's implemented through the subdivision chapters in terms of multifamily development with over 250 average vehicle trips per day require a second access point.
So it's not driveways to a
It's
single
not
family
flag
home?
drives that are by definition only able to have one access point.
Thank you. And thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Shall we talk about the actual language that is going into this ordinance? I think there were some concerns about,
My whole thing was just so that the community at large feels that there's actual specificity towards those lots. So that's why I was bringing it up earlier. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, it is just about those lots. So how do we change the language so that that is absolutely clear? And I don't know if there is a way to do that, but that's what I was getting at.
well, it's a good goal.
I still think there should be a maximum slope on it. I mean, I don't really.
I agree with you. I don't feel comfortable just saying anything.
Fire code will rule the day. I mean, I don't want to put that on the fire department even. I think that and I don't know enough about it to say what that slope should be, so I don't know that we can make a decision on that, but there's parts of town that in my four-wheel drive in the snow, I can't get to. And I drive, I'm kind of a wild driver. I'll go anywhere. So I think there are limits to what is viable, even if there's ways to, so I just think we need to set some, and I think we need to do a little more work on that, I guess, is my point.
Okay,
To provide safety. If there's more than one house on that driveway, which there will be, correct? It's not just a driveway to in this case, to 231. Are there more, does that driveway that they're going to use access more than just their house?
no,
It doesn't?
no, the flag lot that is part of the LUBA decision only goes to one lot. It's part of a joint driveway
Right.
with the house next door, but it doesn't, but the flag lot takes off after the house.
But so the flag, and I'm sorry, I don't know more about it. So once you take off from that driveway, that's where it becomes over 18%?
So I will note that, again, trying not to talk about a specific land use action that may come before the committee on remand
Okay.
or commission, but there are a number of properties that are accessed off of pre-existing flag lots that are fully improved, in which those flag drives exceed 18% slope. Some affecting the 13 lots that we're talking about that would be accessed off of shared driveways, in which multiple are serviced off
So
those.
that's where the question of community-wide safety comes in. If it's just accessing one house and those people want to, whoever wants to kill themselves, it's fine. Relatively fine, sorry. But I think that one of the points that one of the commenters brought up is that, you do end up or maybe it was in our written comments, it becomes more of an issue if you're accessing more than one home off of that property and for some reason a car spins out or goes sideways and then you don't have access or you can't get out.
Right. I probably should clarify that every legal lot of record that can accommodate a single-family home under both Oregon and Ashland land use law can have two dwellings on those homes. So even on those 13 subject properties that can be developed as one dwelling, they could also develop with an accessory dwelling unit.
But it's one owner.
Yeah, and what this ordinance doesn't do is newly create opportunities for the creation of new lots with multiple owners serviced off of a flag drive, because any new lot created would still be subject to the 15% maximum or up to 18 with the variance.
Okay, so as I see it, we can work on the wording in this proposal. One option is to continue this to our next meeting on August 25th, and think about how you want the wording to go, come back then and make suggestions and adopt something then. Or I suppose we could just go with it the way it is.
Well, I won't be here
I'd
on the
like-
20th. Oops, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, John, sorry.
Yeah, can I make a motion?
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that we reject this code amendment.
Okay, I hadn't considered that option, but it's definitely an option. Is there a second?
Second for purposes of discussion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to just reject, excuse me, to reject this proposed code change. Discussion? John, do you want to talk about why you're making the motion?
Sure. And I think that the testimonial that we heard tonight was very thoughtful. I think it was very complete, and I think it was very comprehensive in referencing our code vis-a-vis state law, vis-a-vis the City of Ashland's comprehensive plan, and vis-a-vis the City of Ashland's 2025 Community Wildfire Protection Plan. I think it's important to also consider in looking at safety and legality of increasing driveway slope standards, what serves the greatest good of the community. And I would ask you all to really think about, does the modification from 18% to 20, or God forbid, 24, really serve the greatest good when these, relative minority number of legacy pre-1997 lots are predominantly on long, steep, narrow, winding, shared flag drives, where there are many residents impacted by that driveway slope and by that development. And so for those reasons, I don't see why we would increase or make an exception for such a small number of steep wooded hillside lots beyond 18%. It doesn't seem practical, I guess. So that's my rationale.
Thank you. My rationale for seconding the motion is out of a desire to try to get to a more clear and objective standard that might apply to these variance reviews. Leaving it open-ended, I think it makes sense, the comment that we might actually be opening ourselves up to a taking claim by leaving it that way. So maybe we could ask staff to come back with some different language based on whatever more feedback we can offer them before the next business meeting to address the clear and objective problem. And also to possibly address another alternative concept here, which is to limit the scope of availability of the proposed variance to certain lots of record predating adoption of the standard at issue, where the owner either purchased or took possession of the affected lot before adoption of the standard. We've talked about some of the potential due process issues here, but it's not totally clear to me, based on that discussion, that we found an answer. And
You're talking about identifying the lots individually?
lots individually by date of purchase because one of the commenters is totally right that any property owner who purchased their lot after adoption of these city standards knew or should have known about the standards and how that might affect buildability. So providing I hesitate to call it a blanket exemption because it's not, it's pretty targeted, but maybe the scope is even bigger than it actually needs to be as proposed here. And if we don't limit the availability of a variance to lots obtained by current owners before city adoption of the standard, then maybe we are greasing the skids for development that otherwise would, or development that would undermine the purpose of these standards. So, my second is not to say no to the proposed ordinance, but it is to ask for some further consideration and study.
Okay, so hearing that, we have a motion on the floor. Michael, will you go ahead and call a roll? And the motion is to reject the proposal. Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Marr,
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips,
Aye.
Commissioner Kincairn,
Aye.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Chair Werner.
Yeah, aye. Okay, the motion is unanimous. We have rejected the proposal in the staff report. So we could either, we can let that go to the council, or if you want to take up Commissioner Leininger's idea of maybe working with this a little more in terms of the language, we could continue this meeting to the 25th and do that. Or if you'd rather just, if you want to go ahead and give this to council now, we can do that as well.
Chair, can I make a motion
Sure.
to continue this hearing to our next business meeting, date certain?
Okay.
For the purpose of-
The hearing's closed, so it'll be continued
Yeah,
deliberations.
I'm sorry, that's my mistake.
No, no.
But
Continued deliberations.
to continue
to the
deliberations
August
to the next
25th
meeting.
with the idea of having us and staff work on language that might incorporate what we've heard tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
Oh, okay. It's been moved and seconded to continue deliberations to August 25th and to work on, have staff work on some language and have all of us think about language. And is there discussion on the motion?
I would interject on the motion in that if the commission is going to be evaluating new language, that the hearing should be continued to allow for members of the public to comment on the new language provided. So although you've closed the public record at this time,
We can open it back up.
if new information is going to be provided to the commission for consideration, you should anticipate reopening the public record so that people can provide comments on that amendment.
I think you should reopen the hearing now and continue it rather than going to a date after the hearing is closed
And then
and creating a
trying to
noticing issue.
Yeah, yeah. So we,
Can I withdraw the motion or else reframe it as what Derek just said?
okay. So your motion is to have us reopen the hearing and the record tonight and have the hearing and record continued to August 25th so that we can do some individual thinking about language and have staff think about language in anticipation of that meeting.
Yes.
at 7 PM.
at 7 PM here in the council chambers.
Can I make amendment to that?
Sure.
That, and I'm not sure exactly how we would word this, but it would be helpful to have the list of purchase dates that was referenced earlier in the meeting so that we know where these lots fall within their vintage.
You have to also look at inheritance and if things pass through inheritance and change names, there's still the original purchase date as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know what the legality of that is, but
I just want to make sure that we have the data that we need if we're going to deliberate.
Yes, good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Linenger made the motion, Commissioner Marr seconded it with the amendment? With the add-on?
Correct.
And I'm good with the add-on.
Okay, so is everybody clear about what we're voting on? No? Okay, let's vote on the motion. Michael, could you do the roll call?
Commissioner Marr,
Yay.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Concairn,
yes.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Chair Werner.
Yes. Okay, motion passed unanimously. So I will reopen the public hearing on the variance issue and reopen the record on the variance issues. And then I will continue the hearing to our next meeting of August 25th, 7 PM here in the council chambers for further discussion on wording based on what we've heard tonight. And new input from staff. Everybody satisfied? Okay. So continue. Okay, it's 8:31. This finishes up what we're going to be doing on the first type 3 public hearing tonight. We still have a second public hearing on another set of code amendments. Would anybody like a break? Okay, let's take a 6-minute break to 8:37. We're going to reconvene after our recess, and we will look at a second type 3 public hearing on code amendments in response to recent state legislation. This is a request for planning action PA-L-2026-00019 to amend sections of the AMC to implement Senate Bill 974 from 2025, House Bill 2138, also from 2025, and House Bill 4037 from 2026. The Ashland Municipal Code sections to be addressed are AMC 18.2.2.030, AMC 18.2.5.090, AMC 18.2.5.100, AMC 18.3.4.040, AMC 18.3.5.050, AMC 18.3.5.100, AMC 18.3.9.040, AMC 18.5.1.010, AMC 18.5.5.030, and AMC 18.6.1.030. This is again a request for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council, and these actions will impact housing, application approvals, and public involvement with the applications. And it's my understanding that these are before us because the state law mandates them. Because this is a legislative public hearing, we do not need to ask about ex parte contact or site visits. I will acknowledge one public comment that we did receive in writing, a letter from Steve Rouse, president of Rogue Advocates. I will open the public hearing. Staff presentation. We have Brandon in front of us tonight.
So thank you. The amendments that are presented before you this evening are part of an iterative process where we came before the Planning Commission had study sessions on April 14th and May 26th, and the City Council was briefed on the legislation and the proposed local approach at its study session on June 1st of 2026. So as such, you're familiar with the ordinance changes in terms of, but this is the first time you're seeing it in draft ordinance format, which outlines the recommendations that were provided to staff at those prior study sessions, and I'm going to go over those briefly in a few slides. As Chair Werner noted, this is in relation to implementing Senate Bill 974, portions of House Bill 2038, as well as House Bill 4037. And I'll go through each of those bills in a moment. But essentially, the ordinance amendments across the board are intended by the state legislature to streamline residential development review so that more qualifying applications are processed as type 1 administrative reviews, and public hearings only occur when permitted through an appeal, and I'll touch on 4037 and its implications on that. Essentially, the ordinances also expand housing opportunities by codifying single-room occupancy standards within our local code in compliance with the state law. Those code requirements have to be adopted by communities by January 1st of 2027. So the City of Ashland would be doing those in advance of that requirement. I should note that some of the other requirements of Senate Bill 974 and 4037 are already in effect under state law. And so applications that come in can apply state law for their approval under those clear and objective standards. So essentially this also amendments would align our local procedures for notice, appeals, residential design standards, and clear and objective housing review. I should note we have a separate project underway with Rogue Valley Council of Governments, which is doing an audit of Ashland's land use code to see where, and not just Ashland's, but most jurisdictions within the valley, as to what standards are clear and objective for housing, and are going to be making recommended changes for each community to address those standards. So there will be more following on that. Specifically in terms of 974, it does, as I noted, change a number of the initial decisions of the city to be administrative, establishes that housing developments that are clear and objective do not have a quasi-judicial hearing before the initial decision. It changes the notice requirements in our current code are 200 feet to property owners within 200 feet, neighborhood organizations. It limits that to property owners within 100 feet and does not provide for notices to other organizations. So that amendment has been provided. It does retain a 14-day written comment period by which somebody receiving the notice can provide comment to city staff on the action for consideration in making a decision on the proposal. The city staff would issue a written decision with findings essentially, and I would say that Planning Commission hearings under 974 do remain available for appeal, but only on non-clear and objective housing applications. So in the case that there is a conditional use permit or a application for a commercial mixed-use development or commercial developments which are not housing related, those would still be actions that could be reviewed by the Planning Commission either at an initial hearing or upon appeal. Yes.
But it also requires that those who are appealing are only the applicants.
Under the scenarios that I just outlined, where it's not a clear and objective housing application, anybody can appeal those.
Right.
But if it is a clear and objective housing application, the decision is made by staff, at which point, if that is to be appealed, the only potential appellant under House Bill 4037 is the applicant. So it would eliminate the opportunity for neighbor appeals or any of those impacted parties within 100 feet of the development to file an appeal at the local or before LUBA. The Land Use Board of Appeals is also restricted under 4037 to only the applicant. So this gets a little bit into some of the details, but I wanted to note that currently we require a two-step process for subdivisions of 10 lots or greater than 10 lots, which would be an outline plan presented prior to and getting approval, and then subsequent to that, an outline plan, and once that's approved, submitting a final plan concurrent with that outline plan. Under Ordinance 3307, the outline plan and final plan could be submitted simultaneously up to 20 units, and that was part of the direction that we received from the Planning Commission of the review threshold raised to 20 or more lots. Classification of qualifying variances as type 1 actions, and retention of the existing, I should note that the retention of the existing zone change and annexation, 974 requires that those be approved administratively as well for upzoning for increased residential. This body, as well as the City Council at the study sessions, recognized conflict within state law. I think I have a slide on that further, so I'm jumping ahead of myself. So we'll come back to that. So the Senate bill also states that for developments of greater than 20 units or more for 1 and 2 family developments, that residential design standards cannot be applied. When we discussed this with the Planning Commission, it was acknowledged that Senate Bill 974 included a sunset date for that design standard exemption of January 1st, 2033. And so the draft ordinance that's provided before you actually embeds that in the ordinance to ensure that it is not a persistent change, but one that would have to be reevaluated in 2032 to ensure that it either continues or does sunset locally as well. So single room occupancy, House Bill 2138 established specific requirements that were largely taken from the state code and put into our local code. It allows for up to 6 single room occupancy units on any lots allowing detached single family housing. It allows in multifamily zones a density increase of 3 times the maximum density. So in an R3 zone lot, we allow 20 units per acre. Those would typically be apartment complexes, studio, 1-bedroom to 3-bedroom units. If they are proposed as SROs, then they could increase that to 60 units per acre. It establishes local single-room occupancy standards, and we provided definitions. Most notably, it goes into some detail in terms of where the state law stipulated that single-room occupancy units were those that had shared facilities. So the ordinance presented this evening, and I do have a modification I'll show in a bit, are intended to state that if a single-room occupancy development had a shared kitchen, all the individual units could share that kitchen. They could have private bathrooms. The inverse is also true. They could have shared restrooms and private kitchens, but what they can't have is both a kitchen and a bathroom within a singular unit, and it be considered a single-room occupancy, because that is de facto an apartment at that point. So we update the applicable land use tables to permit them in the residential zones. And I will jump to Senate Bill 4037, housing applications. Again, these are state mandated changes to the hearing process. I did touch on these on the introduction in terms of specifically for housing applications that are subject to clear and objective standards. Those are a type 1 administrative review, no public hearing, notice to property owners within 100 feet, and written comments can be provided during that 14-day period prior to the initial decision by staff. And only the applicant may appeal to the Planning Commission, and only the applicant may appeal to LUBA, and this is what we were touching on earlier. Again, related specifically to those housing projects. So zone changes and annexation. So we do deviate from Senate Bill 974 in this case, that Senate 974 does allow certain residential zone changes and annexations to be processed administratively without a public hearing. However, we reviewed state law that has yet to be modified as part of 974, that it states that legislative actions, including a zoning action, would have to be adopted by ordinance. It stipulates that an ordinance requires a public hearing, and that a public hearing, a council action on land use legislative changes is required, and that is a public hearing. So we're not amending Ashland's existing zone change procedures or annexation procedures. Again, retaining the existing public process and hearing process for council and planning commission on those. I should note that if through the legislative process, the legislature does further rulemaking and makes modifications and clarifies this question, then we could be coming back for a legislative amendment that addresses that resolved conflict, or if implemented under state law, it would supersede our law, and that an applicant could apply under those standards. So I thought I had provided a recommended change. I think maybe I did modify this on a separate computer prior to coming forward. Essentially, I can read it into the record for consideration. On the single room occupancy standard, let me open up the code reference. If you look at section 12 of the ordinance 3307, I'm sorry, it's not section 12, that's definitions. I didn't install it, so. So it's under section 3 that the section 18.2.5, 100 single room occupancies, section B1, essentially it establishes how single room occupancies are permitted. It's not that section. Sorry, it's section B5, where it states sanitary and food preparation facility conditions. This is a suggested amendment to address potential confusion between sections A and B, C, and D. So A states, every unit must have access to both sanitary facilities and food preparation facilities, which may be provided within their unit or as shared facilities. Taken alone, that could indicate that a unit could have both a kitchen and a bathroom. And so the request would be to amend it to, after the comma following facilities, to conclude the sentence with, every unit must have access to both sanitary facilities and food preparation facilities, period. Striking, which may be provided within the unit or as shared facilities. Largely because it is covered under B that stipulates an SRO unit may include private sanitary facilities or private food preparation facilities, but not both. And also D, which stipulates a unit containing both private sanitary facilities and private food preparation facilities is a dwelling unit, not an SRO unit. Such unit does not count towards the minimum number of SRO units and is subject to the density and development standards otherwise applicable to dwelling units in the zone. So again, with that singular half-sentence strikeout, I think it clarifies the confusion that the word may was introducing. And with that, I do have the staff recommended motion that the Planning Commission recommended the City Council approve proposed draft ordinance 3307, provide the title to it as presented in the staff report. And this is a public hearing. I'm not seeing an audience behind us, but if anybody was here to speak, I could step aside and take questions.
Okay. We do have one member of the audience. Would you like to speak? Okay. Then.
So I'm available for questions.
Yeah, questions for Brandon.
Chair, I have questions.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. HB 4037 mandates that only clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures can apply to review of a housing development application. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. That makes it a limited land use decision under ORS 197. Is that basically accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And that new law also limits the availability of notice and appeal applications, right? Or notice and appeal on such applications. But does it say who makes a decision on a housing application to approve or deny?
It says that it shall be, I believe it states that it shall be, the initial decision shall be made. It doesn't necessarily say planning commission, but a hearing can't be held.
A hearing can't be held.
Correct.
Right. So we're simpatico on that, right? But it doesn't say whether it's staff or commission, does it?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
And it looks like you're reading the.
Yeah, well, so I mean, like, let me back up. I'm not trying to grill you. It's just that I've attempted to read deeply into these new laws and into our code and into the unamended Oregon revised statutes comprising Oregon land use law. And so I'm trying to gain clarity on what these bills do, what they don't do, and what, if any, decision space remains to the city about how to implement them. And consistent with the home rule provisions of the Oregon Constitution, Article 11. And so I need to rifle through a few more questions just for clarity's sake before we get into discussion. Does SB 947, wait, no, sorry, we covered that one. Do any of the new housing laws change the chapter of the Oregon Revised Statutes 227 that authorize this commission and that, establish procedures for its decision making?
No, those procedures for when the planning commission has a hearing before it would still be subject to 227
Right.
rules and requirements.
Right, and there is authority in 227, right, for a commission to make a decision on a land use application without a public hearing, right?
I'm not familiar with that having been done, so.
Okay, well, that's ORS 227, 175, subsection 10.
Okay.
Okay. So reading the new state housing laws together with the unamended parts of state land use law, can the city council decide in this proposed ordinance to continue vesting authority in the planning commission to make an initial decision to approve or deny a qualifying residential housing application as a limited land use decision following the procedures of ORS 197 and 227?
I will have to defer to legal counsel and whether upon review you can make such a recommendation to the city council, and if they wanted to investigate that further, that would take further legal research to ensure. Presuming that they do have that authority, then that would be an amendment to 3307 as presented to change the procedures to establish a planning commission hearing, non-hearing process by which the planning commission could be the initial decision maker on those applications.
Anything to add?
Yeah, that's probably too specific of a question for me to answer off the fly. Yeah, but I'm happy to follow up.
I'm sorry I didn't preview the question earlier. I mean, this totally has the flavor of an ambush. I get it.
No, I'm happy to follow up though.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So just last, has any other Oregon city enacted an ordinance like this, vesting in administrative staff the sole authority to make an initial decision on a residential housing application? Or have other cities taken another approach?
I'm going to look to Derek if you're aware. I'm not aware of, cities are all scrambling to enact 974, 4307, and 2138. And as such, we are seeing applications come in saying that they are currently under state law requiring an initial decision from staff exclusive of a hearing process because they're not required to have one. And that was implemented in effect by the state legislature on July 1 of 2026. So essentially that staff decision-making process is already vested for applications that are coming in. We were trying to codify it through this adoption process, but if the Planning Commission and City Council modified that to have a different structure, that we'll check to see whether that's permissible.
Okay, so what's the actual source of authority for that kind of decision being made by administrative staff and not referring it to the commission? Is it in 197, 185, little 6, or is it somewhere else?
I'd say it's in House Bill 4037 and the language provided in that. However, Derek,
What I would say, kind of both last question and this, as far as other Oregon cities, I'm not sure. Cities in the region have gotten together and discussed 974, and I think the approach we've brought to you for 974 is similar to the approach other cities in the region are taking, specifically Medford. I don't know if any of them have adopted that. I think 4037 frankly came as a surprise to cities. City of Medford reached out to us and said, did we know anything about it? And we went back and looked at the legislative update from DLCD, and it was sort of a sentence and a broader paragraph about urban reserves saying that it was making some procedural changes to the handling of residential applications, and very much, in my mind, downplayed the magnitude of the changes that were required. So I don't know of any other cities that were either aware of it or have made changes to this point.
Yeah, I will echo that also in city attorney circles, is that there has also sort of been a scramble to put together legislation and local ordinances that'll comply, and there hasn't quite been consensus, so, from what I've seen.
Thanks very much, everybody. those are all the questions I have.
Okay, so if we ask staff to pursue figuring out whether we can, whether the planning commission can administratively make an administrative decision on applications, new applications that come forward, that's gonna take us continuing the hearing to a date certain so that we have time for staff to do the research.
I certainly would be in favor of a continuance for that purpose. I also think that it is possible to remedy my concerns about the drift of land use decision-making authority from the chartered commission to administrative staff. With a
And-
simple strike and replace amendment to one line of this draft ordinance under section 10. I'm happy to offer that motion for discussion if folks are interested. Otherwise, continuance sounds like a great idea to me.
Okay, so what is the one change that you would suggest to allow planning commission to be the non-hearing decision maker?
Not so moving, simply
No, just-
to float it. It would be to adjust the language. Okay, with reference to our packet, here's where it is. On page 8 of the draft ordinance, and that's total page 60. At the very bottom of that page. This is under the heading, Chapter 18.5.1.050 C1.
I'm sorry, you said total page 60,
Yes, I have total page 60.
10 of 11?
Eight of 11.
Page 8 of 11.
Okay,
And that paragraph as drafted ends in a 4-line, bold, underlined sentence.
correct.
Right. That effectively means that applications for housing development are limited land use decisions and shall not be referred to the planning commission for review and decision under either of the relevant subsections of the land use ordinance, affecting respectively type 1 review and type 2 review. In neither case will the planning commission review a housing application, not under type 1 and not under type 2. That's what this is saying,
Okay,
okay? And what I propose is to just tweak that language a little bit by removing the word not from that last sentence to say that these applications shall be referred to the planning commission under type 1 procedure and shall not be referred to the planning commission under type 2 procedure, which comes with all the trimmings of a public hearing and under ORS 197.
Chair,
yes, John, go ahead.
can I just offer a comment?
Sure.
So this is, I think, the second or third round that we've looked at this state legislation. And I appreciate the due diligence that my fellow commissioner has paid to this. But I think it's important to recognize that this constraint on the use of type 3 hearings was precisely one of the driving principles behind some of this legislation. And so to take that out is to sort of, I would argue, undermine the core rationale for this in the first place. The goal is to move applications quicker and to rely on the deep expertise of our staff, and enable them to lend as much value as possible, maximize value in housing production. So that's my point of view.
Okay, thank you. So are you not concerned that, well, so I'm coming at it from goal 1, which is public engagement. So I think the planning commission, because we have open meetings, is going to have the potential for more public engagement to come to the meetings and hear what we're doing, or watch us on RVTV. And so I think what I'm hearing Commissioner Linenger say actually sounds good to me. But obviously you don't think so. So,
Well, I'm not sure there's an objectively correct answer. I'm just saying that the spirit of this legislation that came out of Salem is precisely to accelerate the approval of housing. And so one of the ways you do that is by limiting the number of type 2 and type 3 hearings and relying more on staff and administrative decision-making in order to speed approvals. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, and so I'm understanding the legislation to take away type 2 and type 3 hearings for housing. And what I'm understanding Commissioner Leninger to be saying is he's got a way for the Planning Commission to review and approve housing applications that are now type 1. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful that our land use code gets us to a type 1 procedure on all of the qualifying applications, that the code is there to catch this state mandate in an orderly way. However, our existing type 1 procedure allows staff advisor referral of such matters to the Planning Commission, and the section of ORS that's revised by these laws leave undisturbed the local government prerogative to establish approval procedure. And for the record, I'm talking about Chapter 197A, Section 400, subsection 4C. And I hear you, John, about the purpose of the legislation and not wanting to undermine that. I'm completely supportive of the purpose of the bill. However, I'm aware that these laws leave undisturbed that local prerogative that I just discussed, because that's how we implement Section 11 of the Oregon Constitution, providing for home rule. And where the legislature does not unambiguously say that administrative staff has to issue these decisions, I think we would be remiss to interpret it that way. The state preemption is predicated on the impossibility of implementing a state mandate in a city ordinance. If we can do both at the same time, there is no preemption. And I think these laws reserve for the city the decision space to review these qualifying applications in a type 1 procedure by the Planning Commission, if and insofar as we want it to.
Brandon?
Yeah, I do want to note that the section that you're referring to amending has to do with the type 1 applications, which I know you're aware, that the vast majority of type 1 applications are currently staff administratively approved. On the rare exception, staff will advise that a particular application come to the Planning Commission for review under the current rule. The section that you are looking at amending was stipulating that that could no longer be done for housing applications that are subject to clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures. However, by removing the word "not" and stipulating that all such applications for clear and objective housing shall be referred to the Planning Commission for review, it's a new requirement that is not presently the case for, again, that type 1 planning actions that are typically administered by staff. So it shifts the review authority from staff for type 1 actions, such as a minor land partition or the development of 3 units or a duplex on a property, to be a planning commission review and decision without hearing. And my concern is that noting a planning commission meeting would also engender those people that receive notice an expectation that they're providing public comment at a hearing, which would not be the case, because a hearing would be precluded.
Right.
So again, it's instituting a new requirement that's not in our current code to have a greater review requirement if you presume that presenting before the Planning Commission is a greater review than before staff. But again, we'd both be applying the same clear and objective standards. And so I just wanted that to be clear for the commission of what's being contemplated is a wholesale change in terms of how type 1 actions for housing are processed.
Those are really important points, Brandon. Thank you. And they make me want to kind of refine how it is that I'm trying to communicate my intent here. I don't want the Planning Commission to take on every decision of the city for housing applications that ordinarily would be a ministerial matter of staff, or ordinarily would be processed as a type 1 without referral to the commission. My concern really is about the applications that we ordinarily would process as a type 2. And
Such as the PSO.
such as the PSO and the related variances. Yeah. And if we only think about it in those terms, then I think the striking the word "not" in that relevant sentence becomes a little bit more reasonable. Because it would just say that instead of type 2, PSO and variance reviews, we would do them under the type 1 procedure without a public hearing, but taking public comment with whatever notice and appeal is allowed, the same as staff would do.
Okay, so while we're thinking of that, we also need to be cognizant of 9:30 is approaching, and that's our witching hour. So we can have a motion to continue this meeting for half an hour?
Yes, I did want to note that this is scheduled for the council on August 18th. So any kind of recommendation from this body that's going before council should be provided this evening. A continuance would essentially be forwarding a recommendation to council that the Planning Commission had not completed the review, and therefore we would present that to the council as your recommendation.
And can I just add one further thought to this idea that I'm floating and have not yet proposed a motion for, which is, and it's an important point, which is that the type 1 review proceeding that I'm proposing for the Planning Commission would be according to the procedures of a limited land use decision under state law. That's Chapter 197, Section 195, and the relevant section of Planning Commission decision-making under ORS 227. Those are kind of important qualifications, but that enables this kind of type 1 review to meet the requirements of these new housing laws and of Oregon land use law read together while preserving the home rule authority of the city of Ashland to make land use development decisions within its own community.
Okay, so it's clear to me this is gonna take more than 10 minutes. Do I have a motion to continue this meeting for another half hour?
Thanks, Chair Werner. I move to extend the meeting 30 minutes to 9:30 PM.
10.
Oh, to 10 PM.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded that we continue the meeting to 10 o'clock, or as soon as we get done with discussion. And is there, all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. 4-1. So we have until 10 o'clock or sooner if we get it done. So now you're proposing to amend this language so that the new type 1 decisions, i.e. PSO and variances, would go to Planning Commission for non-hearing review.
Absent, sorry,
Go,
absent an appeal. Isn't that correct? Absent an appeal?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they would, I guess they'd also come to us with an appeal.
But we could structure it, however we want with respect to appeal. I don't really care who hears it, whether it's the planning commission under a de novo public hearing with evidence and testimony, or whether that's done by the council. I personally don't care. What I want is for the planning commission to make those initial decisions.
Can I get a couple questions in before we get to discussion?
Sure.
Is
So
that-
let me close the public hearing.
Well, before we get to discussion though of staff, before the public hearing's closed.
Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Go
Chair
ahead.
Werner. Brandon, if I may, it sounds like to me that state law caps notice at 100 feet for qualifying, clear, and objective housing applications, but it looks like we're reducing the notice radius of all type 1s to 100 feet. Is it possible to preserve the 200-foot notice where state law still allows?
It is possible. So this, I probably should have highlighted as a local decision change that the Planning Commission can consider in the City Council. Staff are recommending the shift to 100-foot notice as a universal standard in order to ensure that our review of applications does not inadvertently reduce notice to. If something could have a 200-foot notice, we cannot notice 200 feet for a housing application. And we didn't want to have a disparate standard for non-housing related projects. But again, it is something that we could incorporate.
Yeah.
I think in my opinion, I would like notice to go to 200 feet where it's still allowed. I think, people want to have feedback and know what's going on around them. And so I would like to look at that. My second question here, since we're moving quick, at the May 26th study session, we talked about this PSO outline final plan threshold. And it was my memory that we'd settled on 12 lots rather than 20 because 12 lots was in alignment with the cottage standards. And I believe somehow we've lost that in translation to tonight where we're back at 20. And so I wanted to bring that point up as
Yeah, I
well.
believe that might have been a review consideration also before City Council, but we can look back. If this committee wants to recommend a 12-level threshold as part of tonight's, we could forward that as part of your recommendation for council's consideration.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And that's all from me, Chair Werner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Russell.
Okay, so,
Chair?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just have one quick question
No,
for Brandon. Brandon, thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Chair Werner. So you and your team have been working diligently on interpreting the state code to incorporate into our land use code. So what are the repercussions of not following, to the best of our ability, the direction of these state laws?
So a couple repercussions. I think an applicant can apply under the state law, and if our code does not align with that, still make that application. A repercussion, if we apply law that is inconsistent with the state, an applicant could appeal that decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals or to Circuit Court, I presume. Other repercussions would essentially be that the ordinance, when we present this in its final format to the Department of Land Conservation and Development, they will review it for consistency with state law. Obviously you're a review body, the council's a review body, but the state also reviews all legislative changes in land use and acknowledges them when received. So ideally, if we are incorporating something that is in violation of state law, they would catch it and provide back comment that we need to amend to be in alignment.
Thank you, Brandon. That was my understanding. Can I make a motion, Chair Werner?
Sure, go ahead.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve first reading of ordinance number 3307, titled an ordinance relating to supporting housing production through streamlined review of residential development applications, implementing Senate Bill 974, House Bill 2138, House Bill 4037, amending AMC 18.2.2030, AMC 18.25090, AMC 18.34040, AMC 18.35050, AMC 18.35100, AMC 18.39040, AMC 18.51010, AMC 18.51050, AMC 18.55030, and AMC 18.61030, and adding a new subsection AMC 18.25100 as presented in the staff report and attachment.
Okay, so you're not including the 200-foot notice for existing, for non-affected type 1 decisions?
And the 12 unit.
And the 12.
Including the 200-foot notice for non-affected units and the 12-unit threshold.
Second.
Okay, we have a second, we have a motion and a second.
Is this time for discussion on the motion?
This is absolutely the time for
May I
discussion.
interject here?
Sure.
Chair Brenner? Thank
Go
you
for
very
it.
much. Commissioner Mayor, just to ask, is this incorporating any of the stuff that was brought up earlier about processing type 1 applications that used to be type 2 through the Planning Commission? This is just for clarification because I was having a hard time with hearing the motion.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I apologize if it was a little muddled or rushed. So given Brandon's commentary on the implications of deviating from state law, I'm recommending that we pursue the suggested motion with limited modifications, which have already been discussed, to the best of our ability in adhering with the spirit and language of what the state has intended for municipalities. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Mayor.
Okay, so I'm not clear. Do you want to include Commissioner Leninger's proposed keep the Planning Commission involved in type 1 decisions, or?
I structure the motion to be as conservative as possible, given the specific response received from the head of planning.
I guess that's a no.
Yeah, that's a no.
Okay. Okay, so is everybody clear about what the motion is?
Chair, may I please offer an amendment to the motion?
Sure.
Thank you. I move to amend the pending motion with regard to AMC 18.5.1.050 C1 decision as follows. By first striking the word "not" from the last sentence of that section. Second, by adding a period after the phrase "this subsection." So that's the end of the sentence. And third, by striking the phrase "or subsection 18.5.1.050 C2. I further move to add that the end of the same subsection on decision include the following sentence: an application for development of housing that is subject to a clear and objective standards, conditions, and procedures pursuant to ORS 197A, Section 400, subsection 1, shall not be referred to the Planning Commission for review and decision under subsection 18.5.1.050 C2. End of amendment.
Okay, I didn't quite get all that, but we'll try it anyway. So you're amending the motion to reframe the motion to say Planning Commission is able to hear type 1 decisions that are not public hearings for PSOs and variances.
Yeah, it would ensure that the Planning Commission could initially decide a qualifying application using the limited land use decision procedures of Oregon land use law, specifically ORS 197.195 and ORS 227.175, subsection 10. It recognizes the ambiguity regarding the decision approval procedure in state law. I have a different interpretation than my colleague about what the legislature intended, because the legislature left in place all of that Oregon law that I've discussed tonight. And I think the intent of the legislature is to allow a city to reserve to itself whatever decision space is not specifically preempted by unambiguous commands of the legislation. And this is a way that we can keep the Planning Commission in business.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for the amendment, and the amendment takes precedent, so we'll vote on the amendment first. Is everybody clear what we're voting on? Okay, Michael,
I think, real quick, we have were you going to say something, Carrie?
At this point, I don't even know how to question it, really. I mean, so I was, and then I'm like, no.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to take a vote on the amendment first. Michael, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Marr,
No.
Commissioner Phillips,
No.
Commissioner Kincairn,
No.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Chair Werner.
Yes. Okay, split vote, 3-2. Motion fails. So we're on to the main motion, which is as presented in our staff report on page 9 of 9, total number 47, with the addition of the 200-foot additional notice requirements for applications that are not covered by these changes, and for the 12-unit limit to PSOs. Everybody clear? Okay. Michael, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Marr,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Kincairn,
Yes.
Commissioner Leininger,
Yes.
Chair Werner.
Yes. Okay, motion was unanimously adopted. So we have a motion or a recommendation to send to council now on this batch of changes. Thank you all for your hard work tonight. And we're now on to open discussion. Is there any, go ahead.
I would just like to, I mean, I'm really appreciative of your deep dive. And I appreciate the intent. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Okay, so under open discussion, we have the letter that came in before us from Joseph Kauth. And I think, as I recall, the interest was actually in having him come to discuss that.
It seemed this letter was pretty succinct, and I don't know how we would really consider it without him bringing forth what he wants to talk about.
Okay, that's good rationale. Can we ask staff to invite him to come to the August 25th meeting?
We can.
Okay. Is, the other question I had under open business is, do you have any, have you thought any more about the planning commission retreat? And if so, do you have any questions? Or not?
No, I think last we talked that it would be ill-advised to do it in the summer and looking at fall. So we'll come back to you with some dates. Sorry, I don't have those this evening.
Okay. No,
Did
not a problem.
someone tonight suggest that we invite the water master here to talk about water rights?
You want one of us to invite?
I'm sorry, I thought I heard that.
No.
Okay.
Maybe not. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? 20 minutes early.
I move to adjourn.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjourning?
Yes.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, John, very much for continuing to participate.
Thanks for having me.